the actual interventions might be very similar, but in terms of the wrapping, the branding, the front end experience, a little bit of the communication stuff. So it is kind of similar. And I'm owning it. I'm owning up to it. Like,
so what do you want to talk about first? Tony, you want to go pricing, or do you want to go by we can save my real world question I have for you guys of what to do in a marketing situation. We can do that second if you want.
Well, plus Dave got information about Bark that I want to hear. But yeah, let's just hit pricing real quick. It's just, this is a horse that's been beaten 100 times, but this is 101. I get curious, and obviously all the political news that's going everywhere right now. So they're talking about price is not price fixing. So price fixing, just for people listening, therapists are technically supposedly not allowed to talk about reimbursement rates because they could fix prices behind the scenes, saying, I talked to Dave, I talked to Jimmy, we are not going to accept any prices lower than $100 a unit. So when an insurance company tries to negotiate rates, we have, quote, fixed prices. That is against the law. You can't do that. But then government, what?
I didn't know that.
Yeah. You're not allowed to talk about it. And usually in your payer contracts, there will be a disclosure in there talking about this. That's why nobody talks about it. But the government had passed a law for price transparency where hospitals and large organizations and insurance companies are supposed to share reimbursement rates. It hasn't taken effect. The law is there, but nobody's going with it yet. Price controls is a different topic, and that's kind of what I wanted to hit on just real quick. Price controls would be the government comes in and says, no gas station is allowed to raise gas prices beyond $3 a gallon. The problem with price control, obviously, on the surface, it seems amazing. It's like, oh, yes, price of food is too expensive. The population needs food. The government is going to come in and fix the price of food. Well, the problem is it leads to shortages. It doesn't adequately compensate growers, farmers, food manufacturers, and it leads to a whole bunch of other problems. So there's two sides to every story. My side is clearly biased. But then you go down a third rabbit hole and you look at the research. And you look at the research on pricing, and there are studies published where it says a medication that's more expensive tends to be more effective. Yeah. A wine that's more expensive tends to taste better. And I still say if therapists want to be research informed, back in my day, it was research based, we would use all the research, not just the research that resonates with your particular biases.
Right.
So all the research would be, hey, how do I make this more effective? How do I make patients more compliant? How do I improve the quality in my patient care experience? I make it more expensive. And so whether we're talking about Medicare, and I just published an article on LinkedIn where Medicare is effectively controlling prices. They're trying to keep prices low. They're such a major third-party payer. It has a negative effect because Medicare pricing is so low. Amazing therapists like Dave can't afford to deliver an amazing patient care experience on a Medicare reimbursement rate. So Dave leaves. Dave doesn't do it. But I really think if we want to improve the outcomes, one of the easiest lever to pull is make it more expensive. And then, of course, the argument, well, what about people who can't afford it? If I can put $1 million in my bank account treating fewer patients, I have a lot more free time to deliver services that I will pay for myself to people who can't afford it. It's not free. There's no such thing as a free service.
Correct.
It's a service that I am paying for to deliver to a person who can't afford to pay for it themselves. All right, guys, where do you want to go from there?
Real quick, Scott, checking in live here. Great article, Tony. He just commented.
Right.
So, Scott, Tony would love if you were able to just share that link with, let's say, 2 or 3 colleagues, send it to them on LinkedIn DM or email, share that link out. It's an interesting article, and it's pretty short and quick and right to the point. So just share out Tony's stuff. We would appreciate that.
So I'll go first because I'm probably the most ill-informed. So I never worked on pricing. Like, as the communications guy in radio, I was always the guy creating the product, right? I worked hand in hand with sales, and we worked together. And I could talk about a pricing model that I've worked with or used or heard or first heard of. I go with price and value, right? Like, so you have that seesaw. I could bring up a slide, but I won't. You have a seesaw. On one side is price. And that's the side most people focus on. It's easy to control because look, I just went on my website. I changed my price. My price has now doubled. I did a Labor Day sale. My price has changed. But what Tony's talking about is perceived value. We tend to just take the word perceived off of that because all value is perceived value. You can't tell me this is more valuable to someone else. Just take a bottle of water in a supermarket or at a Yankees game. There's still 2 bottles of water, but one has more price because it has more perceived value. It's harder to get water at Yankee Stadium because they control the market. And that's the different ways that Tony is talking about, is who's able to collude, who's able to control. If we talked about, wasn't that the thing that where employers tried to convince employees that it was illegal to talk about what their salary was because it would make everybody hate each other? And that's the way to make sure no one understands what anybody else is getting paid, so they can't understand where they fit in the bell curve. So I would say, number one, is making something more expensive, does it make it more valuable? It depends, but the research shows that people look at things more valuable. Did you hear about the shoe company Palessi? You ever heard of that one?
No.
You have. It's called Payless. They did a pop-up store and they made all the lights bougie, and they brought in, beautiful
fake Instagram influencers. They invited them. They all showed up
and they were like, how much?
I'm trying to be nice. I'm going to do.
And here's where I'm going with my clothes. And this is like a side topic because I'll let Dave go, which is they asked these people, what would you pay for these shoes? What would you pay for? Oh, I would pay $300, $400, $500, $800. And they were the Payless shoes that 24 hours before were on the rack in Payless. But because we changed it, it's Palessi. Now it's something different. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, but Jimmy, healthcare is different. But Tony already circled around on that. If there are people that can't afford it, you actually, if you charge a higher rate, you buy yourself some time to help people who can't afford it. Now you can go crazy and go ham on pro bono work, but someone's got to pay for it.
The Palessi thing, I do remember where they created like a fake store like in a mall, and it was like it was like gold font, different. Obviously, it was a different logo than Payless. They invited these fake Instagram influencers, and they all got punked basically. Like they all were like, "Oh my God, these shoes are $30," and I was ready to, and people actually, I think they actually took transactions. Is that true? That like people actually paid a couple $100 per pair?
I think so. It might have just been a stunt, but there was one about, I think it was either San Francisco or New York, where this kid was selling like ramen noodles, and he made up a fake 5-star restaurant that was only taking reservations 8 weeks in advance, and kid was making bank selling 89-cent packets of ramen. Perception is reality.
100%. Now, I hope I'm open and transparent enough to basically admit this is what we do. This is what we do at Concierge Pain Relief. My therapist and I, let's say we have a client who's 85 that has Parkinson's, and the way we evaluate and treat them is pretty much no different than any other Luna therapist. We try to make it better. Any outpatient Medicare Part B therapist in any other state or city or rural area. But we kind of do what Payless did with Palessi, like in terms of the wrapping of like the messaging on our website. We spend more on ads. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe it's not. We definitely had the phone call process like we talked about in previous episodes. So that's kind of part of like the branding, the experience, all that before. But I'm saying the actual intervention of like, are we going to do, rotations and single leg stance and, tandem walking and LSVT big type movements for our 85-year-old with Parkinson's, the same way that therapists would do in, rural Arkansas or West Virginia or anywhere else. The actual interventions might be very similar, but in terms of the wrapping, the branding, the front end experience, a little bit of the communication stuff. So it is kind of similar. And I'm owning it. I'm owning up to it. Like we package it up, and on our website, it says the Parkinson's Breakthrough Program. So people call in and they're like, hey, can we get some more information on this program? And, how much is this program? And it sounds like Medicare or, insurance might not cover it. Yes. Christy, thank you for your live comment. She said, make it feel luxurious. So that's kind of what we do. And it is the effect of,
This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is Bain and Company's B2C value pyramid. So, Christine is saying emotional, make it feel badge value. I actually have Dr. Dave, and you have someone down the street, or it's affiliation and belonging, or it's those things. It's, can you provide those things? And if you can charge more.
And really real quick before I kick it over to Tony, like we talked about this before, we did a deep dive on some other episode where we talked about like packaging and the wrapping paper. And we just we put these words for these programs, like on my website, we have, on the stroke CVA page, it's the stroke success program or something like that. I don't even remember the actual names, but like people call in and they're like, they want this thing. Because if they call somewhere else, it's just like, do you take, my Medicare for your in-home physical therapy and I happen to have a stroke or Parkinson's or whatever. But when they come and like Christy said, make it exclusive, like, oh, this is for me, but it's not for other people. And some people, this is the beautiful thing, Tony, about pricing, right? Like some people are like, I want the thing. I want to pay for the thing. I've worked so hard in my life where now I can invest in the thing or the program or whatever, compared to everything else. And everything else looks the same. And our programs, I believe, kind of stand out in a different way. And then that's what results in some of the interest. But I don't know, Tony, maybe also with the pricing and people, using that to filter themselves in or out, or what else around pricing with this whole topic?
I think it just goes back to, Gary Vee said it, and we've shared it on this broadcast, like just put it out there. What's interesting is I can go buy a $2,000 hamburger that's got gold leaf and an ostrich egg on it, and like all this crazy stuff. Or I can go to McDonald's for a $3 hamburger, right? What's interesting, though, is I make that comparison for therapists who call higher volume clinics mill clinics compared to a niche practice. The reality is there's a market there for both. Mm-hmm. On an absolute basis, McDonald's is making far more profit than that fine dining experience that's selling a $2,000 hamburger. But just even if you just have it on the menu for price anchoring purposes to say, look, this is possible, you're at least giving the community the option. Most of us, me included, don't even want to give them the option. Now that being said, I understand Jimmy's quote. I understand the assignment. I understand my niche. I understand my market. I am not serving the same community as Dave would be. So from a physical therapy perspective, I am not trying to brand and market a premium experience. Most of the equipment in my clinic is broken, but functional. My seats were rescued from the trash. I didn't spend hardly any money opening my physical therapy clinic. And along those lines, I am the Family Dollar, Dollar General, lowest possible budget operator, but I still get my patients better. My patients still come back for other conditions. Like I've got proven success behind that track record. But with that, I'm okay taking minimum wage for the services that I'm delivering in my business model. So, therapists always some therapists always want to say like, it's not about just serving the rich and all of these things. You're right, 100%. But any of us could serve those who can't afford. We just need to build a vehicle that allows us to do that. And for the record, I'm the only clinic in my geography that offers pro bono services, that doesn't send patients to collections if they don't pay, that has never turned a single person away because their insurance has exhausted and they don't have any more visits. Like the hospital doesn't do that. The NovaCare, Athletico, ATI, nobody else in my community does that. I am the only practice who does that. And the only reason why I can do it is because I have other high margin, high profit services that I can provide.
And you're happy with the current profit margin of your practice? Like if you can offer all that stuff?
For where that business is within the scope of everything, I am. Even when I'm like right now, for those who don't know, everything is changing. The economy is changing. We're under a little bit of a crunch for the big picture profitability. But even with that, when I'm looking at it, I'm like, all right, I guess I could go high, margin in the PT clinic. but I just don't want to do that. I don't want to build that business right now. There are other places I could go for the money that would still allow me to run the business at the profit margins it's running at. Yeah, I'm satisfied.
All right, let me ask a question. Because if someone was listening and wanted to start a business, they wanted to start a clinic, and we haven't used any real numbers here. We haven't used $1 amount. We're just using theory, right? So how do you turn theory into an actual number? And we didn't plan on talking about this, but I learned about this a number of years ago, and it fascinated me because I always wondered, how did someone pick $120 for a pair of Nikes, right? Where did that come from? Have either of you guys ever heard of the Van Westendorp pricing model?
I've heard of it, but no. I don't know it.
All right. It's just 4 questions that you would ask potential consumers, and the questions will help create a box around too expensive, on the expensive end, way too inexpensive, I think it's cheap, or on the bottom end of a bargain. And then you realize that your price should actually be between the 2 inner lines. It's just 4 questions, because we know if I say, hey, Dave, I'm selling this thing that you like in your community. How much do you think I should charge? You're going to be like, oh, I'm going to give you a low number because I'm not going to charge for it. Or if I'm your buddy, I'm going to like $10,000, but then no one's going to buy it, right? So asking these people questions, these 4 questions, the Van Westendorp pricing model, is what I like to call ricochet questions. They're not a direct question. I'm going to bounce this question off the wall and get you thinking of putting this thing in context. And it makes you think less about the number while still giving me a number. So here are the 4 questions. I'll flash them on the screen, and then you can see we'll go over the purposes of all 4. The question is, at what price would you consider this product to be too expensive to consider? That is the ceiling. That is too expensive. Don't go near that, right? That is, I'm never thinking about this. At what price would you consider this product to be too cheap, where you start to question its quality? So that's above the roof and below the foundation, right? Those are your outer edges, the edges of the bell curve, if you want to look at it left and right. And then the inner questions, at what price would you consider the product to be getting expensive, but still worth buying? There's your sort of upper margin. And then your lower, at what price would you consider this product to be a bargain, a great buy for the money? So it really, those 4 questions start to give you some ideas. And of course, as we know with large numbers, when you ask those 4 questions, because that's scalable, you can ask 4 questions to people. When you start to ask those questions at scale, you can start and plot those results and see what your product is actually, what people might consider. Because again, people will tell you what they're going to pay for something, and then you go on sale and you might not sell anything. That's a risk in business. But when you can plot that, now I would say a very clear, concise explanation of your product or service would need to precede those 4 Van Westendorp pricing questions. You have to understand what they're buying, because pay lessy, right?
And so that's the crux of it, which is if someone's never had physical therapy before, they don't understand what's great, is it okay that a home therapist comes from VNS and comes into my parents' home for 12 minutes, says, yeah, walk with a cane, you're fine. And then they leave. And that is their perception of physical therapy. Or, and not like Luna. We've had patients, no offense, Luna's great, they're huge, but we've had some patients call us and say, hey, we're calling around, we want home physical therapy. Oh, did you try anything else? How have you tried physical therapy in the past? Yeah, we had, I had a Luna therapist come and they didn't put their hands on me. And let's say they have some condition where they expected manual therapy, or maybe clinically need it, or they just prefer it or whatever, like a stiff knee or I don't know, whatever, something you might not be able to out exercise. And I know, Tony can have some pushback against this, but someone calls us, but Luna, they didn't do any hands-on manual therapy. And Luna, I think, charges $120 out of pocket for cash. And if we're charging $250, $300 out of pocket cash, they may or may not understand that. So again, that goes back to the phone call. So what are your thoughts on that, Tony? What are your thoughts on the service? It's easier to sell the pen, this camera, this laptop, a physical thing with those 4 questions versus a service-based business where there's so much variability and might require the consumer to actually understand the service before just just picking a price.
Jimmy, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say is you brought up sell the pen. And I would say the pen is physical therapy. It's the how. Don't sell the pen. How much would you pay to not have to leave your home, but still go back to running from after your ACL surgery?
But the solutions for a pen are like, it either has ink or it doesn't. It writes or it doesn't. And like with a service-based business, the difference between my therapist that we send versus another could be very different, but they both think that that's the pen.
So write me one sentence that clearly defines your business, which is how much is too expensive to have a physical therapist come to your house, or you could probably even write this without using physical.
That does this, does this, does this, does this.
But
I need a good pen to write that.
Stop saying that does this, that does this. That's how
that can help you with.
How much would you pay that you'd never have to leave your house, but would get back to running in 12 weeks versus describe what they're going to get out of it versus how you're going to get them there. This was very clear to me when I was forced to advertise beer and cars, and they kept talking about cold beer. And I remember that was one of the things that fascinated me. I was like, I'm responsible for making it cold when it gets to my house. Why do you keep calling? Well, it's ice cold Budweiser, because they're selling the story. When I say ice cold Budweiser, if you've ever had a cold beer, you're already tasting it. The cold beer is responsible on the gas station for keeping their coolers at a certain temperature, or me for keeping my fridge running. They're selling cold beer. And if you notice, this is in the United States anyway, you can't have someone drink a beer in an advertisement. Did you know that? You've never seen someone on television drink a beer in a Budweiser commercial. Then hold on a second. They're handcuffed with that and still sell beer because they sell the story. They sell the outcome. The outcome is, I don't know, man. If I buy a 12-pack of that, apparently I start playing beach volleyball with friends, and a beach volleyball match breaks out. Look at all these girls. They sell the outcome. So let's say, Christine says she recently started a concierge mobile therapy practice. It's just me, so I can only take a certain number of clients anyway. You're available. You're exclusive. So I can only market to people willing to pay a little bit higher. Got it. I don't need everybody to be comfortable pricing because I can't see everyone. Christy,
Amen.
Understands the assignment. Think about this as in dating. You're only supposed to date one person, right? There's a lot of people that date more than one person. You're only supposed to date one person at a time. So that is very exclusive. So she's understanding, like, to be able to exist, she has to charge more. And then 5 years from now, for me, a win with Christy would be, I'm charging so much that I've got actually like 8 to 12 slots a week that I can give away for nothing, or, give away pro bono.
So I did the same thing. Sorry, go ahead, Tony.
To Dave's point, if you have a consumer, which we get them, who has no idea what therapy is, what to expect, what's going on, that's a very different situation than if you have a consumer that's been to another therapy provider, they've experienced something, they like it or they don't, and now they're looking for something else. It's just like talking about the pen once again. I always think about when you see a president signing a new law, they use a different pen for like every letter of the signature. And I'm assuming because each one of those pens is going to go as a bribe to one of the Congress people or senators behind them. That pen, it's not about how well it writes, how heavy it feels, how smooth it is. It's about this was held by the president during, this law signature. We have to understand the context. Now, to Christy's point, if she's in the position she just described, I don't know that she would necessarily have the data yet to know what is the right price, and so this is where you need to experiment, but you also need to have enough kind of at-bats to figure it out. For me, I'm going to get referrals to my clinic no matter what. Like, we get so many referrals. I can turn referrals away. I have no problem. I can experiment with pricing. And back in the day, I even remember when we were talking about copays and patients didn't want to or couldn't afford a copay. I was like, well, what is the price point? What is the bottom that still makes them feel invested? But if I charged any less, it wouldn't make them buy more. Right. And back at that time, it was around $15. What I had found was when we're talking about a person who's struggling to afford therapy, could I build a solution that gave them the outcome that they wanted, that they needed? What was the lowest price point? $20? Enough people would say no at the $20 price point to my prescribed plan of care. $15? Almost everybody who walked in the door could say yes to $15. Going to $10 got me no additional patients. So I was like, well, it doesn't help me to go to 10. I'm going to find 15. 15 was the sweet spot for that demographic. Now at the high end, I always say, like, somebody's charging 100. Okay, is the person who's willing to pay 100 not willing to pay 150? How many are you really going to lose if you go from 100 to 150? If you lose 10%, it's not enough. You need to go to 150 because you'll make more with the extra $50. And then the same question, all right, is the person willing to pay 150 not willing to pay 200? I got to test it. And we go to 200, and you just keep climbing that ladder to the point where the incremental increase in price outweighs the decrease in acceptance. And now you have your upper threshold, you have your lower threshold, and now you begin to experiment.
Yep.
And back in 2016, I had, like a friend of a friend with, asking for out-of-pocket in-home therapy. And I had no idea. Again, 2016, this was several years ago, no idea how to price it. And I was like $100, right? So started to do that. He referred me to his friend. I go there. That friend is, well off, whatever. And he was just like, he's like, hey, can I just write you a check for $1,000 for the next 10 sessions? And I was like, sure. Right. So that, he literally helped me sell my first package, quote unquote package, but then fast forward to earlier this year, 2024, with the newborn that we have here, I didn't want to go out and see any patients unless I was like, what's a number where it would still make sense for me, but it'll filter out a bunch of tire kickers. So that's why I started with $350 a visit. And I was surprised, a good amount of people. And then I was like, then we kept going, for either me, or I would say for me, it's $350 or $400, or if it's for my staff therapist, Christy, I would say, it's $250 a visit for so-and-so, right? So it's kind of almost like a law firm, the law firm, senior partner charges more, junior partner or associate charges a lower billable rate, which I'm sure there's some Medicare folks that are going to get mad at me with compliance and whatever, and I have to have a universal fee schedule or whatever. But Christy, once you do hire your therapist in the future for this practice you're talking about, where you're eventually transitioning to a clinic, as she said here in the live comment, you could potentially continue to pitch whatever your rate is for your therapist as well, or you could have it lower to catch more of what Tony's talking about, a little bit more of the volume, get them busy, and you pay them and you figure out the math between what the labor costs and some margin for them and the risk and the liability and all that. So you have some choices there. And at least from what I've seen, the higher we go in price, the more, I don't know, it's almost become easier. I hate to, I'm probably making it sound very simplified, but I'm in New York City, but
it's simple,
it's easier.
It's simple, not easy.
Hey, it's Dave Kittle. Are you a healthcare business owner or physical therapy practice owner who is looking to figure out your succession plan or exit strategy? We might be able to help. And in fact, we may be interested in acquiring your practice. If you're interested, you can reach out to me. Shoot me an email at dave@conciergepainrelief.com. That's DAVE@CONCIERGE painrelief.com. Or you can call me at any time, 646-781-8884.